Here's a look at our soil before I even started using wood chips. And the soil we started with is sandy loam, which is 80% sand, 10% silt, and 10% clay. If you've ever tried to garden in sandy soil, you know that it doesn't hold moisture very well. Because it doesn't hold moisture very well, I always use some kind of mulch, and here you can see that I've got a bunch of grass clippings mixed with a few leaves. The main problem I had with using grass clipping was that when I brought in the grass clippings, I also brought in weed seeds. And each spring I would rototill the grass clippings and leaves into the garden, and I also did that each fall. And that's the way I gardened for quite a few years. Then one day Tanya noticed that we had termites in our tree over in the corner of the yard. It was so far gone that there were earthworms and soil and termites way up into the trunk. It was a decent-sized maple tree that hung over our neighbor's property, our shed, our garage, and power lines. So I made the decision to have it taken out. We were sad to see the tree go, but without the tree there, it opened up the yard to a lot more sunshine. When they ground the stump down, they also ground some of the roots that were on the surface around the tree, and when they did that, they thoroughly mixed wood chips with the soil. I took a rake and smoothed out the area, and it made me think of some Back to Eden gardening videos that I'd watched. I started to think about getting some wood chips. I started checking around, and I located a source for free wood chips. So it was just a matter of loading up our truck with wood chips and relocating them to our garden. I know some folks would say that this looks like too much work, but I prefer this type of work in cooler weather over fighting weeds all summer. We started our journey into wood chip gardening in the fall of 2015 when we had the tree removed. And this is a look at our garden in the spring of 2016 in the month of May. One thing I noticed right off is that the wood chips work better than the grass clippings for both moisture retention and weed suppression. But where the chips were thoroughly mixed with the soil down on the south end, I had a lot of trouble for the first 2 years, and I think it was because the wood chips tied up nitrogen. So even though I used to rototill, once I got the wood chips, the rototilling stopped. I just use the wood chips for mulch on top of the soil, and I try my best not to mix them with the soil. Right away, we also noticed a lot of mushroom activity in the garden, and that's nature's way of breaking down those wood chips. For people who have a lot of knowledge of mushrooms, this would be another food source, but I don't know enough about them, so I don't eat any of them. Here's a look at the wood chips after they had been on the garden for about 15 months. I dug down just to take a quick look, and I was surprised that they had already started to break down just a little bit. And from our original sandy loam soil, we were quickly gaining some nice, rich, organic material. Even though it takes the chips about 3 years to fully break down in our garden, I could already see the beginnings of that happening. On the right, you can see a handful of wood chips that are from the surface. And on the left, you can see a handful of wood chips that are down in contact with the soil. And they are starting to break down just a little bit. They're more compact and look a little more like soil than wood chips. And that's after 15 months. After a full 2 years, you can see that the chips had started to break down even more and were starting to look like good rich soil. At this point, the problem area where the tree was also improved. In our second year of gardening in wood chips, I started to notice that the garden was just overall more healthy and productive than it had been in years past. This is a quick look at 2017. In 2018 we were in our third year of gardening in wood chips, and at this point I think we were getting the full benefits of the wood chips. Not only were they continuing to suppress weed activity and retain moisture, but I think we were also getting some nutrients added to our soil, along with the organic matter. I first added wood chips in the fall of 2015, and each fall after that I added a thin layer on top of what we already had. Even though I'm sold on wood chips might not be for everyone, so if you're thinking about using them, I would suggest that you start a small area and see how you like it first. Even though using wood chips has been an overall positive thing, there are a couple of negative aspects, so let's talk about those now. Late in 2018 and early in 2019, we had a real problem with animals digging into our wood chips, and I think they were after grubs. There were raccoons and also skunks, and I finally solved the problem by making sure that there was no easy way to go under the fence or over the fence. In the fall of 2019 and in early 2020, I haven't noticed the same thing, and I hope it stays that way. But I thought it was worth mentioning. I think one of the most annoying things about growing in wood chips is when Bermuda grass sneaks from your yard into the garden, and that stuff can travel 3 or 4 feet before you even realize it's there. And once it gets a good foothold, it kind of travels in all directions, so it can be a real pain to get rid of. I accidentally discovered that sweet potato vines outcompete Bermuda grass. And as you can see, I have it planted all around the edge of the garden, and it does all of the work for me. When it gets too far out into the yard, I just mow it down. Here's a look at what the garden looked like in 2019. And now that we're into 2020, I'll be starting my 5th year of gardening in wood chips. Like I've mentioned before, wood chips might not be for everyone, but I'm happy with what they've done for my garden. If you garden in wood chips, I'd like to hear your opinion on what you think of it. And if you're just now finding this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and follow along this year and see how the 5th year goes. We'll see you next time.